Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hong Kong Confidential is brought to you by Teresa's Turkish Towels. Teresa imports the finest 100% Turkish cotton towels that dry very quickly, making them perfect for Hong Kong's humid climate. Say goodbye to the traditional smelly and stinky towels and try the colourful and fresh selections available online or in Teresa's Wan Chai store. Use the promo code CONFIDENTIAL online or mention this podcast when you visit in person to receive $100 off your entire order when you order 2 or more towels. With 100% satisfaction guaranteed or your money back, the only thing you've got to lose are the musty smells that permeate traditional terry towels. Visit www.hkturkish.com in order to get the address and directions to Teresa's semi-hidden location. A warning to our listeners, some of the topics discussed in this podcast may be disturbing. If you need support, please contact your local crisis line or helpline, and if you're in Hong Kong and you'd like to call the Samaritans hotline, you can call them on 2896 0000. Today I'm here with Hass. Hi Hass.
Hi Jules.
Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm very well. I'm very, very well these exciting times. And
I know, you're a mover and a shaker in Hong Kong, aren't you?
I have ADHD, let's put it that way.
That's brilliant. Do you really?
I do.
Oh, really?
And it's never been treated, so this is what you get.
So does that mean that you're actually really good with doing loads of jobs at different times?
Yes, I'm quite the multitasker, but it also means that I struggle to complete a task because I've started it and then I'm like, ooh, butterfly, shiny. And then,
so you get easily distracted.
To say the least, yes.
That makes sense. Cass, where were you born? Tell me a bit about your childhood.
So I was born in Hong Kong. My dad is a professor of law, so I was born here, based here for a lot of time. My parents are originally Sri Lankan, but we moved around quite a bit. But yeah, growing up third culture between borders, to say the least, I was an airport baby.
So you're a third culture kid and growing up in Hong Kong. How was that?
It was quite interesting. I think I'm immensely conscious of my privilege, though, and I know that as a Sri Lankan, life isn't similar for a lot of Sri Lankans. And I struggle with that because I'm not culturally or socially, I'm neither Sri Lankan nor am I anything else. So I often find myself between cultures. And I struggle with my identity, and I still do to date. But
that's super interesting. You don't really feel Sri Lankan. Do you feel partly Chinese or Hongkonese? Or?
Absolutely not.
So what?
I think at the very least I'd go with just Hong Kong expat.
Right.
Because I think we do have our own culture and we do have our own way of doing things.
I think so, yeah.
But at the same time, there are parts of me that are very Sri Lankan. Like if we went for dinner, I'd still insist that I pay the bill. But then at the same time, there are parts of me that are not very Sri Lankan. Like I don't identify with their priorities and their values.
What are they? Can you share with me? I don't know many Sri Lankans. So what sort of values and priorities do they have?
I would hate to speak for them because I don't think I have lived their lives to be able to tell their story. But in my opinion, or in my experience, I think just like a lot of Asian cultures, we don't like to challenge the status quo. We don't like different. We tend to be very conservative, but that also can be disastrous because we don't like making leaps into progress because that would mean changing things, and we don't like change. We want, if you take Sri Lanka politically speaking, for example, we want change, but we're not willing to put down a cup of tea or work longer past 5 o'clock. And that's something I struggle with personally. But also, I think as a LGBT person, Sri Lanka we sort of don't kiss and tell. We are somewhat more progressive than our neighbours in South Asia, but at the same time, we don't have support or protections for LGBT people. And again, that's something I struggle with, because it's not like I can go back there and tell my story as a gay man, because they would not welcome that conversation. But again, I have privilege, and people back there who are, say, LGBT don't, and that's why I really struggle.
Do members of the LGBTQ community have to hide their status in Sri Lanka?
Well, it's quite baffling, to say the least. And something I really notice is that privilege plays into this. For example, we have an somewhat openly gay minister. We have openly gay celebrities. We have a trans businesswoman who is very prominent and she's very outspoken, and nobody would touch them. And they get a lot of respect. There's no hate. Then again, they do play it down, but at the same time, they're allowed to be out. But at the same time, if you were a member of the general public, you wouldn't be able to expose your sexual orientation or simply embrace your sexual orientation in any way, shape, or form. It would have to be very private. And I think, again, privilege plays a big role in that. But yes, I think majority of Sri Lankans do experience persecution from both within their families and their own communities and friend groups, but also from the state and the authorities.
It's not socially accepted or politically accepted.
Absolutely not. There are no protections, and I know several people that get into sham marriages with, say, a member of the opposite sex, but say the husband may be a gay man and the woman may be a lesbian, and you get various arrangements like that, similar to the mainland, just to overcome the challenges.
Right, so then people stop asking questions, and then they can sort of carry on this sort of sham life to cover up what they're really doing and living truthfully but behind closed doors.
Again, going back to how conservative Sri Lanka is, once you reach a certain age, they go, why aren't you married?
What age is that? 25 or something?
Well, in many cases, especially for a woman, that would be younger, because again, that's one of the things I struggle with, is that you're born, you go to school, you get educated, you're raised, you go to university, you get a decent job, you get married, you look after your parents, and then you die. That's sort of what life is seen as. And so once you reach that, been to university, you've graduated, and the next question is, well, when's the date for marriage? And if you don't have a significant other, that raises questions. And it's a common joke in Sri Lanka if somebody does not have a girlfriend, or if you're a man, or a boyfriend, if you're a woman, to go, haha, are you gay? That's a very common joke.
Had these questions thrown at you by your family?
100%. I don't hide my sexual orientation because I'm an activist, and you can Google LGBT and you'll find my name there. But at the same time, I haven't had the conversation with them about it because I know they won't take it well. But at the same time, I have been asked, where's your girlfriend? Are you gay? Or
How do you respond to that? Do you go, yeah, I am? Or do you say,
not my family. I just
pass the sugar?
Yeah, I would pass the sugar.
You just avoid it?
They know I am a proponent of gay rights. They know my position on human rights has always been very progressive and all about equal status. But at the same time, they know when it comes to me personally, I haven't shared too much with them, not just in terms of my sexual orientation, but also in terms of my life. There are some things I feel are better left unsaid.
How is that, having to hide that part of yourself or not be fully open about that side of yourself with your family? How does that feel? Or is that just normal because that's what you're used to? It's
normal, not just for me, for a lot of Sri Lankans, but I think for me personally, my experience has been that it has resulted in me having a lack of relationship with my family. I can't call them and tell them, oh, today I did this, today we managed to change laws, today we pushed for equal opportunities and we won. I can't share major moments in my life. That also has taken its toll because it's extended to my personal life and my professional life. So I do feel very divorced from them. And there is a disconnect, and they feel it and I feel it. And I think that very much stems from my lack of coming out, to say the least.
Right. And do you think that it upsets them or makes your parents feel sad because you do have that disconnect?
I think we're all upset. I think we're all hurting. But I think as a family, I think so much has happened. And people say, yeah, but they're your family. But at this point, I don't have expectations. I think we've gone through a lot as a family. I think we've had our good times and we've had our not so good times. And I think most people would agree that families are complicated, and you go with it, don't you? You go with it.
Yeah. You can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family.
Apparently not.
What was your childhood like growing up in Hong Kong?
I don't remember a lot of it, and I think that's my mind being selective about the memories, because I don't think I had a very good time growing up. I think I was always conflicted. I was always culturally the black sheep. I think I was always very much a raging homosexual. I liked what I liked. When I was 5, I remember I insisted that I get a Ken doll, and my parents commissioned a search across all the toy stores till they found the pet Ken doll I wanted.
Did they? Well, that's great.
Well, at the same time, I recall my aunts and uncles being like, why are you getting him a Ken doll? That's not appropriate. But I was like, no, I want a Ken doll. I was very much a brat, I'll give you that.
Were you?
Even now, I'm like, Daddy, I want that, Daddy. But,
and do you get it?
I stamp my feet hard enough, it happens. But at the same time, for the most part, I struggled with who I was, and I always felt like I was being judged. Or like, I remember moments in my childhood when I would be like, I remember when I was about 9, I was playing with my little cousin and we were playing dolls, and she was significantly younger than me, and my aunt whispered to my other aunt in Sinhalese, he still plays with dolls, like in a derogatory way. And I didn't speak fluent Sinhalese, but I spoke enough to understand what they were saying, and I remember feeling really shit as a child because I knew it was an insult as opposed to a concern. So I have very selective memories like that that don't paint the best picture or the brightest picture as a child. But nevertheless, it was an exciting childhood because I think it made me who I am today, and I think I'd like to think that I'm not one-dimensional, and that comes from my childhood. And I can do what I do because of my experiences and my values.
And do you think it's made you stronger?
100%.
Yeah.
I would never trade my experiences for anything else, the good and the bad.
Oh, that's so great to hear. That's really cool. When did you recognise that you were gay? When did it actually dawn on you? I guess you knew you were different back with the comments from the auntie and the Ken doll and stuff like that. But
absolutely. I knew my interests were not aligned, but at the same time, I realised I was attracted to men, I think probably at a very, very young age, say like 10, 11, 12. And then we've spoken about this before, but when I was 11, I was raped, and a part of me was very conflicted because I felt dirty, and I didn't so much feel like a victim. I just felt like I had done something wrong because it was not even the experience, it was being with a man. I can't say this for sure, but I feel like if that would have been a woman, I would have felt less bad about it because I would have felt like a man being with a woman is okay to some extent, even though it wasn't consensual. And
even at 11?
Yeah, because I just kept beating myself up. I remember I would, so growing up, we had a library and it was very big, so you could hide in it. And I would wake up at 2 a.m. and go hide behind the shelves and just cry. And that's how I spent a few weeks after the experience. And it took me a very long time to come to terms with it. My mother was very overprotective. She meant well, which also meant that, for example, if I had told her, she would have called the cops, like any parent possibly. But I just didn't want that. I knew I wouldn't be able to handle it. At 11, I was like, no, can't deal with that.
Did you not tell anyone?
I didn't tell anyone, and I grew up with that experience. And it happened again when I was 13, and it was the same person.
Was it? I was going to ask that.
I think from then onwards, I started questioning my sexual status, but also as a 13-year-old, you didn't really date per se, but I would like girls, that kind of thing. But then there was never that spark. I always knew that. There was something absent there. And I would be like, oh, I really like this girl, but I think I just was infatuated by their personalities. But I would enjoy looking at men, and I always knew that. I was always sexually liberal as a child, and initially it felt wrong and it felt dirty, but I think I embraced that in due course, and it took me a very long time, possibly till I was 16, 17, because what a lot of people don't know about me, and this is probably the first time I'm going public with this, is that I grew up in a very, very conservative Muslim family, to the point at which I was sent to religious schools called madrasas. And what madrasas are effectively schools where they whip you and they make you learn the Holy Scripture and you memorize it. And I've memorized some of it, and I still remember some of it to date. And they teach you the orthodox teachings of the religion, and you wear religious dress code, and it's very
wow. I'm quite shocked. It's like, wow, that's amazing. Was that in Hong Kong you were sent to?
That was not in Hong Kong.
Where was it?
That was in Melbourne, in Sri Lanka. And it was interesting at the same time because there was a time in my life where I truly believed in it. My mum wanted this for me, and there was a point at which I wanted it for myself, where we both agreed that I would become a religious leader.
Wow, at what age was that?
14.
Oh, how interesting.
There was a part of me where, and then I would go and be with men. I was so conflicted, and I would pray, I would cry, I would ask for forgiveness, I would repent, and I would just be like, I'm so dirty. And I think the older I grew and the more educated I got, I was always politically engaged. I was one of those people, if I saw injustice, I had to speak up, which meant that as I got older and as I got more exposed to the world, I realized that there was something that didn't add up about religion. Something just didn't add up. I respect those who choose to believe in religion, but I think it just didn't make sense to me. And this was not what the teachings were. This was what I read. Because I was like, okay, people are allowed to have their own take on religion, and that's okay. But I wanted to explore it from a neutral point. So I took the text, because the texts are not opinions, they're facts. And it just didn't add up to me. I was like, how can something be so aggressive, so violent? People take different stances on religion, but to me, the Holy Scriptures, at least in the Quran, says that if you're homosexual, you deserve the death penalty.
Does it specifically say that, or is it an interpretation?
It's not an interpretation, but it also goes on to say how God, and I could be wrong, so I'm going to preface this with a disclaimer, but along the lines where, if I remember correctly, God punished an entire city of homosexuals. It was either through a natural disaster or their own deaths, but either way. And people do argue that that was contextual, but I'm like, my personal take is that that can't be contextual because it's very blatant. I mean, if you say the wall is white, the wall is white. You can't say, oh, the wall was white in 19800 BC, but in today's age, the wall would now be green. No, a white wall is a white wall. To me, I think, I'm also optimistic because I think Christianity has achieved this in a way where I believe religion is both the text and the people. I have faith in the people because I think when the people evolve, so does the religion. And I think as long as the people are willing to be progressive and be respectful of human rights, then I can respect a religion. But I think to divorce the two and to say a religion is just the text or just the people is wrong because you can't do that because religion does evolve with time. And that's what's happened to a lot of religions. And religion is subject to the interpretation of man. If majority or rather more and more Muslims choose to abandon traditional teachings and embrace a more progressive view, similar to what many sects of Christianity have done, then I'd be optimistic. But right now that hasn't happened. And I think that was really scary for me because I grew up immensely privileged. Like, I'm not anymore in a way, but like we grew up with help and drivers and everything you could ask for at your beck and call. But at the same time, I always would go to religious school, or the madrasas as they call it, and I would look at the kids that weren't so, because you wouldn't pay for it. It was free. Because they wanted to make it inclusive and open to anybody. So you would meet a lot of people from different walks of life. And I would think, what if he was gay? He doesn't have the privilege I have. Like, I can walk out. I go to an international school. I am allowed to have conversations about these topics. But he isn't. And I think about them now as well, because I left home when I was 17. But they couldn't do that.
Because they didn't have the money or the means to be able to do it.
Exactly. Or even, I don't think the thought would ever cross their minds.
So interesting what you've said so far is that you grew up in a really strict, very orthodox Muslim family. You had this sexual abuse situation. You had to fight with your sexuality. You were thinking about becoming a religious leader. That is a ball of conflict that must have been going on. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been as a young man to deal with all of that.
I did try to commit suicide twice, so I suppose that speaks for itself.
Do you mind talking about that?
First time I was 14, second time I was 16.
Do you know what was the trigger of the events at the time?
I just didn't see purpose in life. Like, I think, again, I never feel like a victim. I feel empowered by my experiences, but at the same time, I think it was a lot for a child. Like, rape and then growing up in a orthodox, in a very strict family, and then having all these expectations of you, and then in part it was emotional abuse as well.
In what way was there emotional abuse?
Because I think...
Well, the fact that you couldn't be yourself.
Exactly.
Sort of pushed in
but
a
also,
certain
I don't know,
direction.
maybe I'm resentful, and I really hope I am, and I really hope I'm biased, because when people say, oh no, people aren't forced to do X, Y, Z in religion, and I can only speak for Islam because it's my personal experience and I can't speak for another religion, I refuse to believe that. Because I grew up in a family where when my cousins, because I had no sisters myself, but when my cousins refused to wear the headscarf, that wasn't an option. They had to wear it.
And when you're a child, you're disempowered. As an adult, you can make...
Well, even as an adult, my family have a tight grip on the younger generation, and there's that whole Sri Lankan and as well as Muslim, or cultural rather. It's not religious per se, but or even in religion, it is ingrained that the elders have more power and you have to respect their decisions. And to me, like, for example, Islam in the West have more freedom and Muslim in the West have more freedom. But at the same time, I have seen it firsthand. I have seen people being subject to things they don't want to do or they shouldn't have to do. And it is cultural as well. But truth be told, again, religion and culture are intertwined. You can't divorce the two, because as long as people form a religion and as long as people are the culture, to say that culture and religion are black and white is impossible, because in that case, you have to take the people out of religion. Religion can only be the text, and you must have that book like law, and there has to be zero interpretation there. I think you can't do that. It's not practical. And I think people go, oh, but Muslims being faced to do this or that, or being forced to do this is cultural. And I'm like, but it is in part. But I think that's also intertwined with religion, because religion does allow for it, for example. So as long as you can justify yourself, there will always be that room for exploitation. But at the same time, I've met amazing religious people who've left an impression on me.
And there's certainly people in this generation who are Muslim, but they're much less conservative, and they are more free and more able to make more choices about how they lead their lives without having to follow everything to the letter, isn't there? So it's like any religion. You get your extremists, you get your moderates, and you get your very non-conservative, you're very free and easy. Liberal, thank you.
That's why I truly believe that the people are the religion. And I don't think you can divorce the two. I think when the people are progressive and the people are good, then the religion becomes better. But as long as the people are bad or the people are orthodox and anti-human rights, then I think you can say, and I think it's very fair to say, there's a problem with the religion.
What's your take on the Me Too movement that's been going on, and how do you sit with that given what you've experienced?
I struggle with it because I think there are two sides to it. Firstly, I think I was looking into the history of it, and it occurred to me that the Me Too movement was founded a very long time ago, but it only got traction because the celebrities picked it up. And to me, that goes into the whole power, privilege, and all of that. And I have immense privilege, so I'm calling myself out as well when I say that it shouldn't have to be that way. But then again, we do look up to our leaders, our celebrities, our politicians to set the examples. I suppose this was the precedent we needed to start the conversation or to ignite the conversation.
Is that a good thing?
It shouldn't be that case. It shouldn't be that way. I'd be lying if I said we'd ever live in a world, or I think we'd ever live in a world in the near future where anyone could step up and
talk about more sensitive issues.
And people would listen. I don't think we live in a world like that at the moment. I think we're pushing for that equality, and I think we have come a long way. For example, I don't think as a person of colour I could be doing what I'm doing right now 20 years ago. I think times are changing, and I think we are embracing a more inclusive and open world. I think as a brown man, as a gay man, I'm so grateful to be born in this day and age, because I don't think I would, even 10 years ago, I don't think I'd have the rights I have today. I don't think you'd have the rights you have today. At the same time, I think we are working on becoming better, and I think that will always be the case, but I think I'm optimistic. I really am.
That's good, yeah, I am too.
We have achieved amazing and phenomenal milestones that we never thought we would achieve. And I think as long as we continue to forge ahead and we continue to resist, I think we will continue to make progress. But going back to the Me Too movement, my take on it is, I'm so grateful it came out. I think we need to tread carefully. It's important that people have a safe space to voice their opinions, to even make accusations, to come out with their stories. I'm very much against trial by media. I think we need to give everybody a fair and just course of justice. I think there needs to be proper trials. I think we can't just brand people as rapists or abusers based on media trials. But at the same time, I think it's important that, for example, people have that space, because there's so much stigma when it comes to victims of sexual abuse. As one, I can tell you myself, especially in, say, Sri Lankan culture, especially who's been with a man, that's just no. If I were a girl, it would actually be better for me given the circumstances, and that's what...
Which is sad, isn't it?
Which is pathetic. It's unacceptable. So I think it's important that people can come out and tell the stories, and they can tell the stories in public, and people listen. I think it gives other people hope. It gives other people solidarity to be able to stand with one another, and I think we need more of that. And I'm optimistic to see how this movement grows. I think I'm conscious, though, that it doesn't grow into a liberal elitist movement. I think we need to be conscious about how we continue to grow the movement, that we are inclusive and accessible, and that this conversation is about everybody across the spectrum of race, gender, sexual orientation, or national origin. And economic status, I think we need to reach out to communities and make sure that everybody's having this conversation in the languages they speak and how they speak it.
That's so true. That's really lovely. And I think hopefully it's moving in that direction, because it did really start as a very heteronormative sort of white women movement, didn't it? But I think it is expanding, and certainly more people are talking. And had you spoken about your experiences before this, or did this stimulate you to speak, or?
I've never hidden my experiences. I've never come forward and spoken about it publicly as I'm doing today. But definitely seeing the Me Too movement, it gave me, unknowingly rather, it gave me a sense of solidarity. It made me feel like I have a network of support. But I think my biggest takeaway from the Me Too movement is that I realised that everybody's experiences are relative, and I think different people experience and are affected in different ways. For example, I met lots of people because of the movement that had experiences that, say, some may call less physical or less violent or less abusive, and some others had more severe experiences, but I think they were each affected differently, and some of them were affected more than the other. And I think that's a very personal thing, and we need to be aware of that it doesn't have to be an intrusive experience for it to still be scarring.
Absolutely, and everybody responds differently in different ways, and everyone has their own background, history, education, feelings, mental health. All of that plays into how people respond. Haas, when did you first get into activism?
Well, back when I was in school, I always was an activist in terms of, I was a debater, I was a model UNR, I was one of those, I wasn't very cool. I had acne, I was overweight, so I had to do something to engage with other people.
That's so cute.
Yes, I did love my little MUNs and playing delegate, but I always knew that I was passionate about human rights issues. My dad would always make a joke that one day I'd be Secretary General of the UN. I think he truly wanted that for me. He knew that he truly wanted me to take that route. But I didn't go to university.
You didn't?
I
What did you
didn't.
do?
Most people think I have. They're like, you sound so educated. And I'm like, I don't know what to say to that.
Why didn't you go?
When I left home when I was 17, I knew that I was losing the financial security that would pay for university. And I very well could have made it work. But to me, when you leave home at 17, you become an adult a lot younger, a lot faster than most people. But at the same time, I know that there are kids 11 and 12 who are working who they became adults a lot faster than I did. But I think it gives you perspective in life. I truly saw a lot of adults who weren't very good at their jobs, and I was like, why would I want to go to university if this is what I'll end up as? And B, I saw an opportunity to get involved in practical experiences and get my hands dirty and build skills that way. And there was a good few years where I was conflicted, where I was like, oh, but for example, when I was in Hong Kong, I would be like, oh, everybody I meet went to like LSE or Harvard or somewhere really fantastic like that. But at the same time, I personally don't have those qualifications, but I want to be where they are. But at the same time, I think I knew what I wanted, and I've always known what I wanted and was willing to work hard to get that. So I took a very alternative route. It wasn't easy. I had to put in more effort, but I think it paid off in the sense that I took on more side roles. I jumped on every opportunity I had, be it paid or unpaid, to get experience rather, and I built on that. I based that holistic skill set because as a very young adult, I chose to substitute my lack of university education with real life experiences.
And that can really work for some people, and sometimes the book smarts aren't as useful as the hands-on smart. So it can really work. So what are you doing at the moment then?
I have recently founded my own nonprofit.
Oh, great. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm excited, but I'm also afraid because it's nerve-wracking, isn't it? I've always been a big picture kind of guy. I used to work in the vulnerable population space, so LGBT people, victims of war, children of conflict, ethnic minorities. But to me, as long as the system is at odds, everything else and everyone else will always be at a disadvantage. And I want to fix the system. And I know it's a very ambitious goal, but I like to dream big.
Good on you. In the ideal world, what would you like to fix?
Well, if you look at today, you look at Trump, you look at Brexit, but I think put these experiences aside, you look at a very fundamentally threatening issue, and that's the rise of populism. But that rise is not just fueled by people hating one another, that rise is fueled by public discontent. Politicians have let people down, and the left is very much responsible for that. We've taken for granted people's votes. We've taken for granted that people will continue to elect politicians in office based on forgotten promises and identity politics. And I think people are tired. They're willing to gamble with their future on the promise, or rather the false promise, of change. That cycle continues to feed into demagogue leaders making false promises, and again, the rise of populism. And I think the democracy and the institutions behind democracy are crumbling. And I think the only way to fix that is to go back to the foundation of democracy, and that is the people. And I want to give the people more power. But I also want to do that in a constructive way. And I think today we have technology that transcends borders, technology that is cheap, and also technology that is giving us rights like never before. I'm building a digital platform that's giving people the tools and the resources they need to step up and be heard in moments that they choose to step up. But it's also going to be safe, secure, and to me, what makes us fundamentally so different is we're going to be anonymous. And I'm giving people the right to speak up, and there are no repercussions for doing the right thing. And I think, for example, you look at places like the mainland at the moment, there are consequences for political assemblies. There are consequences for freedom of expression. Journalists are being pre-screened. Citizens are now being biometrically tagged. They've even started a system of social ratings where they rate citizens. And then we're literally embracing a new era of surveillance states. If people don't keep up, if human rights communities don't keep up with this surge of surveillance and censorship, I think we're looking at a very detrimental future for our freedoms and our civil liberties. And I want to restore the balance and fix the system by giving the people more power.
How are you going to do that?
Well, we're building an app, and the app is going to be anonymous. We're using blockchain, which is the technology that powers Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. We don't have it all figured out yet, and I'm very open about that, because before we do this, I want to go to places that we've never been before, but I also want to have conversations with lots of people across the world, and I want to gather as much data, and I want to use this data, and I want this data to be representative of what people want, because it's not about my struggle, it's about the masses. And once we have this data, we're going to work through a report, and we're going to feed that report into what we're building. So it's going to be about 12 to 18 months of public consultation.
Oh, okay.
And once we've got that data, we're going to design something that's truly representative of the people's needs. But the next year or two is focused solely on the design and the research process.
Oh, wow. Sounds so interesting. And I was listening to what you were saying about, giving the voice back to the people, but with all the Cambridge Analytica information that's been exposed in the media, there's a real indication that it's really nothing to do with the people, and that there's a whole lot of stuff going on with controlling the masses through social media and through subtle propaganda that's being used. And how can we stop stuff like that happening?
When you hear a political consultancy go on record saying that it's not about the voters, that sends a very detrimental message.
Scary, isn't it?
And I have respect for platforms like Facebook that come forward and say, we messed up and we take responsibility for it. But as Mark Zuckerberg said himself, it's an issue they'll never fix. And I think it's an issue they can't fix because they can minimize it, they can address it. But for example, platforms like Facebook need data. They need data because that's what they sell. They sell it to their advertisers, they sell it to their marketers, and that's their value proposition in the market.
But then if they've been selling it to Cambridge Analytica unwittingly, not knowing what they were actually using it for.
There was a degree of exploitation and misrepresentation by the consultancy. But at the same time, I think people will always be vulnerable if they're going to continue to rely on those platforms. And I think people do rely on platforms like Facebook for human rights. For example, we connect one another, we share stories across borders from conflict zones to non-conflict zones. And in non-conflict zones, we mobilize action to support them. And that happens normally via social media. But I think as long as social media continues to profit out of our data and out of our daily interactions, I think human rights will never remain a priority. I think they can say, and I truly believe that platforms like Facebook respect and want to champion human rights. But I think we, the people, is different because we are prioritizing human rights and we're not for profit. And I think as long as profit dictates human progress, people will always be secondary. And I don't want
priorities would not be what they should be.
We've seen the consequences of that, or rather we are experiencing the consequences of that. And I think it's time to fix that.
By that you mean Trump in power and things like that? Is that what you mean? The consequences?
Absolutely. Trump in power, Brexit, Italy's recent election, Germany's not so further away election, but things like that. I mean, again, it's the masses reminding our leaders that they're unhappy, that there are issues that need to be fixed. And I think unless we go back to the roots of democracy and try to fix these issues, no amount of promises, no amount of media, no amount of liberal education is going to fix it, because people don't want education. People want tools and resources. People want power. People want a voice that is not channeled through media, but that's channeled through themselves. And I think that's what we want to give the people. I see our role at We the People as facilitators, not the activists, and I see the people themselves as the activists. I don't want to tell them what their priorities are. That's for them to decide. And I'm very open, but also I'm very firm about the fact that I want it to be an inclusive space. It's not just about the left, it's about all political ideologies, it's about all groups, it's about all religions, all people, and I want that to exist. As long as we're not spreading hate, and as long as we are not hindering human progress, I want it to be representative and diverse, because otherwise we're not achieving anything.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I totally agree with you. That's awesome. So in the future, where do you see yourself in the long term? Like I see you've got this project at the moment, and that I guess will evolve over the next few years. I'm actually wondering whether you'll become a politician. Where do you see yourself? Do you think you'll be in the activist space for a long time?
I think I'll be in the activist space for life. It definitely is my calling. But at the same time, I want to grow with the people. I want to make it huge. I want to scale it. I want to get people on it. I want to fund it. And I've spoken to you about this. I want to fund it to the extent where but internally we can pay our staff well, but also we can make it accessible and we have the resources to grow it while being not-for-profit. And I think this is going to take me a very long time. So in the next few years, I'll still be with We the People. If all goes as planned, I don't think I'd ever leave We the People. I want to build a movement out of it.
Do you think you'll ever get into a place with your family where you can come out and that will be accepted? Or do you think you'll continue just travelling the way you are?
We actually aren't in talking terms at the moment.
Oh,
but
is that because of this issue?
No,
or
we
other
just
things?
fundamentally defer as people.
Right, so different.
But I think that we will reconnect. I expect to reconnect. Would they have accepted it? No.
Right.
But that's okay.
Yeah, and you've accepted that. Yeah.
Life goes on, and there really is, to me, when it comes to my personal struggle, I think as an activist, you accept that you come secondary to your cause, and I accepted that. And when I decided to commit full-time as an activist, and I know that there will be moments in my life where the person I'm with, I want to have a family, so my kids, everybody comes second to the cause, and I've accepted that. So I want to focus on the cause, I really do. I have so much fun with it, and it means a lot, and it's challenging, but it's truly substantially meaningful, and that is enough for me. And if my family choose not to have a relationship with me, it really doesn't matter. When you think about the grand scheme of things, I have bigger worries.
Yeah, and you're so passionate about making a difference in the world. That's really amazing. Good for you. I'm so proud of you and inspired. It's really amazing.
I try.
Cass, thank you so much for meeting with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and hear about your life and your work, and good luck with your research and your data gathering and your creation of your app to save the world. That's really amazing. I hope you do really well.
Well, as I tell most people, I can't guarantee we'll get there, but we certainly will die trying.
Yeah, give it a great shot. Okay. Thanks a lot, Hass. It's
Thanks
been
for having
awesome.
me.
Okay. Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.